December 9, 2020 Executive Committee meeting to order.
We're just waiting to get live on YouTube. Just give it a minute here. I'll let you know.
Okay, I do see the live red flag there, so. Okay. All right, I think we're good to go. So Sarah, you can get the roll off of the screen.
Yes, yep, got the roll call. I think the only one we're missing is Sheriff Biggs.
Okay, and is there a motion to approve the minutes from the meeting of October 28th of 2020?
Moved.
Okay, we got a motion by.
I'll second that.
Oh, okay, so the second was by Chairman Bartlett. Who made the motion?
Paul Miller.
Paul Miller, okay. So motion made and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor of approving the minutes signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, any opposed? Same sign. Okay, hearing none, so minutes are approved. Then Sarah, staff report.
All right, thank you, Judge. For staff report, just to update on the state Cjcc. So I've been participating in the TAD work group. So we've been meeting pretty frequently, working on diversion standards for the state. We know we've got treatment court standards published on the state level, but there's a need for the diversion standards there's a draft form. So we're going through that draft and hope to have the state approve that at their early meeting in 2021, just to really provide that structure and support for diversion programs. So just an example of how our diversion programs really meets all those standards. So it's nice that they included us to be part of that work group, working on those standards. The second update, the reentry grant did open up. So the state reentry grant, so that is due next week. We already got the Cjcc letter of support for the fourth and final year for 2021. So we are looking at doing some modifications to that program, in that we're likely not to fill the halftime peer support specialist. So we've really earmarked funding for 1.5 full-time equivalents for that peer support. We've had one full-time person, Jackie, up and running for quite some time, and she's been working out well, but we've struggled to fill that second position. We've had several people throughout the years that have started and quit that position. And at this point, because of COVID, it's very difficult to do recruitment for that part-time position. And then with the restrictions in the jail, it's very difficult for them to actually get started and get going. So we're going to really focus on Jackie being that conduit from the jail to the community, and then probably putting more funding towards housing this year because of COVID. I mean, every year is difficult, but this year especially, the impact on volunteers is impacting stepping stones, and that's impacting the opportunity for some of our folks to get some housing support. So just that housing is becoming more and more critical as we're kind of moving into the winter time. So really looking to shift some of that funding from the halftime peer specialists into housing. The third point I want to make, our TAD 2021 grant has been received. So I will be bringing that over for Dave Bartlett to sign. I'll do that tomorrow, Dave. So that is, as I mentioned in previous meetings, it's already been approved, but we actually just got the paperwork that we need to sign and send back to the state for the TAD program. No changes to that program for 2021. And then my fourth update, Chris Corpola, Chief Atkinson, and myself submitted a letter of intent for the West Central Planning Commission's Community Block Grant. There's some COVID relief funds So we put together a proposal really focused on housing, reducing barriers to treatment, and then some juvenile harm reduction, drug prevention activities throughout the county. So our price tag on that was about $770,000 is what we're asking for. We should know by December 18th if they are interested in us submitting a full application for those areas. And if that's the case, then we'll get busy working on that, because that would probably be due in January, I would suspect. But that is really a dedicated funding coming down to our 10-county region. So we wanted to be sure that we had an ask in that. And that really supports what we've been working on. It's in collaboration with our Health Done Right to support their housing study, some funding for transitional housing, some funding for the Botman life skills drug and crime prevention materials across the county, to really have staff and materials for that, and a number of different things. So as I said, we also included a project manager, because if we're getting $770,000, we're going to need some support in administering those funds with our partner agencies. So we'll keep you posted on the progress of that. That's it for my staff report, unless there's questions.
Any questions for Sarah on the staff report? Okay, I don't see or hear any questions, so kind of we'll move on then to the status of 2020 CJCC goals. And I think when 2020 started and goals were set, we had no idea what 2020 was going to really be like. So just goes to show how difficult it is to plan sometimes. But Sarah, what do you have for that in terms of you have some?
Yeah, I do. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to pull up the approved goals document that we did at the beginning of the year. So hopefully you can see it. Our goals for 2020 that were approved back in February. Just kind of go through work group goals here. So communications work group. So what we set out there was really to plan some community forums, to update that master playbook, continue that coordinated public relations messaging, and then explore communications tools. So the work group really has been able to work on all of those goals. We only had the one community forum, the OWI, which was a big success just a few weeks ago. But we certainly met the objectives there. And if you think about it, we were, thinking COVID would quickly go away just as quick as it came, but it persisted, and as it still persists. So we did kind of go on a hiatus with all the different work groups for a little while to let people kind of gain their bearings and figure out how to continue their core operations before we started adding on CJCC activities. But the group was able to make progress on all those goals. That group is led by Brenna Jasper. She's with Menominee PD. Our data work group is chaired by Katie Shalley. And again, I think we were able to meet all of our work group goals this year. So this work group pretty much continued to meet monthly, even during the hiatus, because we had more defined work with our dashboards and whatnot. But really producing the smash board, our monthly dashboards, and then the presentation to the CJCC kind of on our trends as we move out. We did complete the first step of our recidivism study and presented that to the CJCC. So now we're moving into the second step of that as that comparison group. That's an ongoing project. Each year, at the end of each year, we really need to update from for those that reach that 1 year, 3 year, and 5 year recidivism points. The work group, this is kind of an ongoing activity as well. The data work group continues to really monitor the data and look for additional potential change targets to bring forth to this group or other work groups. So we have been, we spent a good deal of time this year looking at that OWI data, and that's what really kind of prompted the OWI forum topic. And then we've also talked quite a bit about failures to appear, kind of being that thorn in our side, just where we have a lot of resources going towards failures to appear. And then, of course, the data collection and research to support the other work groups. So those are kind of ad hoc requests as they come in to the work group that we're just prepared to handle those. Our sequential intercept mapping, we did have some data asks on that. So the data work group was in the loop of that and able to provide some additional support if we needed, but the primaries were able to get us that data. Looking towards the DEC work group. So here we did have a change in leadership. So Cjcc Nielsen stepped down, and Andrea Nodoff, our district attorney, was gracious enough to be willing to lead the group and was approved by the council. So that just happened in November. So we do have some changes there. What the DEC work group set out to do at the beginning of the year definitely has been impacted by COVID. A lot of those activities were in person, training opportunities and to meet with the different providers and schools. Those things really came to a screeching halt with COVID. So we have yet to present to Boyceville. Oh, excuse me, we have done Boyceville. We did that right away in January. We have not presented to Colfax. We did get into Purveya for that medical provider piece, but we did not get into Mayo or some of the other providers. The community DEC awareness training. So that is something that we did have some of our kind of partners. We did some training with, this would be the Head Start folks and some of our at-home kind of workers. We have done some training there, but not necessarily for the general community. The Handle with Care program. So that was kind of a mechanism for when we encounter a drug endangered child or somebody that's in school that has had significant contact. There has been, our human service partners have set up a mechanism to notify the schools. So that was set up and we are hearing about that periodically through our DEC work group. Haven't heard about it lately to see how it's actually been running. I know it got started and then school actually went into virtual. So then and then priorities kind of went to other directions, but I think it was getting back up and running. We have created a DEC website. We have local resources. We're still in the process of fine tuning that website, but it has been created and is up and running. For DEC training for new staff, we already have the DEC training video. So that has been distributed to the other agencies, and we really want new staff to watch that training video. The information is still relevant. It was a good training. It helps us all get on the same page with what is DEC and what are the protocols that human service undertakes and what is law enforcement what are they looking for in our other partners as well. And then for the DEC group, we have updated the MOU. So that has been finalized and now it's distributed for signatures. So we really wanted to keep that relevant and, have it reflective of what we're doing, but then also ensure that our key players are really familiar with it and supportive of it. So we did have the sheriff changed since our last DEC MOU. So we have some new players there, but very, very minimal changes were made to that DEC MOU. Moving on to the evidence-based decision-making work group, that's led by Chief Atkinson. That work group really has the TAD oversight and top program oversight, so that's been ongoing. The comprehensive juvenile harm reduction plan, so that really kind of is an outcropping of the EBDM, and we hope that this block grant can actually support the funding to get that off the ground. But part of Project Hope was really looking at the school district in Menominee and providing evidence-based instruction for to reduce substance use and reduce crime as well. So there is a plan out there. We hope that the funding can help bring that not only to the city, but throughout the county. So it's a replacement for DARE. The group also was tasked to look at that proxy tool and potential for validation. So we are in the process of doing a video for law enforcement folks to really encourage the use of that tool, what it's for and why we use it. And it's that mechanism for the pre-charge diversion as well. So we've got the outline for the training. It's just a matter of actually recording that video. We were hoping before the beginning of the year. And then the pre-charged program. So we have kind of reevaluated that pre-charge program, and we want to increase the utilization. And we also kind of reduce some of the potential barriers that law enforcement might have to making referrals. So we just really opened up the number of the types of charges that could be considered for the pre-charge program. And then we also have a plan to make a video for law enforcement on really what that pre-charge program is. We have a change in staff, so we're kind of in between coordinators with that program. But we hope to, once the new staff's up and running, to get that video recorded. And then this work group also continues to look at the evidence-based practices and programs based on our needs. So we really want to be data-driven and data-informed when we're making decisions, and we want to be evidence-based as well. So Chief is looking to step down as far as chair of that work group. So we do have some action items on our agenda today to talk about leadership of the work groups. The other work group chairs are so far agreeable to sticking on with us. Family Treatment Court oversight and planning. So that group is really tasked with the oversight of the Family Treatment Court, to shore up some of the gaps with that just being a newer program, getting going, and then to provide that cross-training opportunities. So that's a quarterly meeting group. So Chris Corpola chairs that group. We are looking, and we'll have some conversation here in a bit, to change the leadership of that group with her becoming chair of our Cjcc. Stepping Up work group, also led by Chris Corpola. So say a similar situation here. So the goals we set out for the beginning of the year was a sequential intercept mapping. So we have completed that. It was very different than anticipated, but we're still awaiting our final report and just a little bit more data to send to them before we get that. But the two main priorities that came out of that was enhancing crisis options and housing. So those are kind of rose up on the list of priorities based on that technical assistance with that sequential intercept mapping. The group also wanted to focus on education and training. So we did complete some foundational training on Stepping Up, really the purpose of it and the why. That was done right away at the beginning of the year. And we spent quite some time talking about correctional officer training. We never did really form up a plan for training. Our priorities were kind of shifted. Plus COVID makes it difficult for in-person training. So that was kind of shelved a little bit. Stepping Up monitors the reentry program. So that was monitored each month. And then those changes that I had previously mentioned. The fourth objective was to advocate for psychotropic medications, MAT. So we did have some training for this work group and really tried to explore, the advantages of MAT to prevent overdoses for that population that's leaving jail. And then the fifth was to implement the brief jail mental health screener at the jail booking process. That goal was really just kind of shelved as well. We were hopeful with this new the computer system that the jail's using that we would be able to incorporate some of the screening processes, but there's a lot of barriers there, and frankly, we started to question the importance of having it at that point in time. So it seemed like a lesser important priority to continue to push with continued resistance and just not really clearly knowing the advantages. So we still have our criminal justice assessor that does provide that piece for folks that are pretrial and kind of moving through the system. But the jail just continues their process as they did previously. And Stepping Up. Very quickly, last one here, Treatment Court Advisory, also led by Chris Corpola. So that group just only met once this year. So we did have a goal for biannual meetings. So we had one in October. We didn't have one earlier in the year, but we were able to update on the program and share some of the recidivism results. We did not have an event this year to kind of celebrate the program and the graduates, and that was largely due to COVID. So that's kind of where we are, I guess, on the goals and the status of the goals for 2020. So certainly a lot of the goals have been accomplished. Some of them were impacted by COVID, and then some of them were impacted by other priority areas that emerged during the course of the year. Hoping this can help kind of inform our discussion in a little bit as far as maybe what we want to change or add for 2021. And then also the work group chairs hope to have some decisions as far as nominations to recommend to the council for our January meeting. So I'm going to stop talking at this point and open it up to the group.
Okay, any discussion related to the goals or status of the goals for the work groups for 2020? Any thoughts? Okay. I guess, I mean, that's where we're at, and doesn't appear to be any discussion. So in looking at the next item, number 6, it seems like there's a written update on the work groups where they're currently at between, well, since our last meeting. And I think since you got the yearly update on, the goals for each of the work groups, I don't see any reason really to go into any detail on number 6. Anybody disagree? Okay, so I think we can move on and then talk about, what we're going to do for next year. So on item number 7, Ms. Corpola and Ms. Benedict and I met last week, I think, and we talked a little bit about some of these issues, and we wanted to run them past you. I don't know, are you ready to roll on that, Sarah? I don't want to put everything on you, but
Oh, sure. Sure.
Why don't we go ahead? What are the thoughts you have there?
Yeah, so coming to the end of the year and having a shift in leadership, this really is a natural kind of point to look at the leadership of the work groups and any changes. So as I mentioned, the communications work group led by Brenda Jasper, she's willing to continue that in 2021. Met with the chair and vice chair, and they also supported that. She's been doing a good job helping us move along, and has she has that eye for the media and that social media, which is an advantage for that work group. Data work group, that's led by Katie Shalley. She is also agreeable to continue as chair. I think she's done a great job continuing to keep us moving ahead on some of those routine activities that we're doing with the data work group. But Katie just has a lot of data at her fingertips and has been very responsive and supportive of that work group. So recommend that Katie continues to lead that work group in 2021. DEC, we just nominated Andrea to chair that group, and she was confirmed. So I would recommend that she continues to lead DEC in 2021. Evidence-based decision-making work group. So this is the group that Chair Atkinson, he was willing to step away. He's been, as I described, just a heavy lifter for us for many years. So he deserves a reprieve from some of the leadership activities. So we discussed at the meeting some possible nominees, and I did reach out to County Board Member Jim Tripp, and he is agreeable to assume the chair of the EBDM work group. So I would recommend that we move forward with Supervisor Tripp to chair that work group. Stepping Up work group, that work group just met recently, and because of those two priority areas that came out of our sequential intercept mapping of the enhancing the crisis options and housing, that group would like to really go on, not really hiatus, but kind of not meet as a formal group for Stepping Up until about 6 months, but have two task groups, the housing and crisis enhancement, meet monthly or continue to meet to work those two priority areas, and then bring back to the Stepping Up work group in May. And Chris, I don't want to speak for you, but you were agreeable to continuing that to chair that as well, correct?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to say silence means yes. Okay, you're right. So that will be less intensive, I guess, on a month-to-month basis. So more of getting the information from the enhancing and the housing, but really keeping that front and center and really elevating that to a higher level that we want to continue to move those ahead. Family Treatment Court. The Planning and Oversight Work Group, that's a quarterly work group. And that's also chaired by Chris. And then we've got the Treatment Court Advisory Work Group chaired by Chris. That meets twice a year. So those two work groups we were, discussing, and I don't know that we've got an answer, or it's for discussion here, but for potential leadership of those two work groups. With the Family Treatment Court, we were discussing perhaps Human Service Manager Lori Radcliffe to lead that. She is part of the treatment team, so that's kind of one of the challenges. Because I thought, well, it'd be nice to have the judge lead that, but again, the judge leads the actual treatment court, so it's that having that oversight component really doesn't make sense. Also have a potential to reach out to like Christina Meyer, kind of the guardian ad litem, or some of our other potential members of that work group to see if they'd be interested in leading that. But Chris, do you want to chime in on your thoughts on that work group leadership?
Sure. I mean, so one of the complications to that, not complications, one of the considerations of that particular work group is the fact that the oversight committee has a lot less hands-on they are truly an oversight committee. There are two other groups that meet on a regular basis related to Family Treatment Court that I think do a lion's share of the work. So the actual chairing of the Family Treatment Court Oversight Committee really is a relatively, I don't want to say simple task, but it's a matter of planning the agenda and chairing those 4 quarterly meetings.
So I guess we also talked about the treatment court advisory. That's twice a year. That really is a best practice standards. That is a group that really is our conduit to the community, help us really look at our message and how we're supporting, folks and how we're connecting with employers and our other service providers. That one also kind of meets twice a year, is more of a kind of a report out type situation. So we did have some conversation about potentially merging those 2 groups, but the treatment court is, more advanced as far as it's practicing, and it's, just been up and running many more years. And the family treatment court does have a different spin and is meeting quarterly. So those were just some discussion points that we had with those 2 work groups, but those are more, not even really work groups. They're more of just kind of those advisory oversight type groups.
Yes, Sarah, just a quick comment on that. When I listened to Chris, excuse me, when I listened to Chris, what she says about the degree that these oversight groups are involved, and the fact that we're a small county, and a lot of times you try to reach out and you have the same folks that are kind of sitting on the same groups. And at least for the oversight group, I think you could combine them. They have a lot more similarities than differences. We're trying to meet those needs for some intensive oversight and treatment with programs themselves. But I certainly think you probably could combine those advisory groups, and then you may want to just reach out and expand the membership a little bit. So some of the folks that are, more closely tied to the family treatment court, probably you could blend them in with the group for adult. But I think just being able to eliminate a couple meetings and make it one, I think the adult treatment court could probably lend some insights to the family treatment court, and there'd just be a little bit more cohesion as far as how we approach it. So I think at least I would recommend that you look at possibly combining those.
And one thought I had was, Chris, do you know whether that would cause any problem with the grant for the family treatment court if it was the oversight committee, which I think is a requirement of that, if it was combined with the oversight committee for the adult treatment court?
I don't think that would be an issue with that. I think that the guideline for oversight committee comes from the standards side of it, and I think both sides have that same requirement in a sense, and so I think we would just be able to kill 2 birds with 1 stone.
Yeah, and that's really kind of an interesting, I guess, a role there, because it's important, I think, to have that oversight to ensure that your treatment courts are have fidelity to the model and so forth. And so you really need some people on the oversight committees that understand, what our treatment courts are supposed to do, and treatment court standards, and what, fidelity to the model really is. Now, it would be perfect to have someone like Judge Smelser serve on that, but he's going to be leaving us in July. But as time goes on, I mean, it makes sense to have someone, maybe one of the judges that has served as a treatment court judge, be in that capacity.
Well, right now, when you talk about treatment courts and just bouncing off both the comments of Ms. Corporal and Judge Peterson, quite frankly, as far as the oversight for that, Judge Peterson, you might be a likely candidate to be able to handle something like that. At least I think that keeps us close to, the operatives of it. And I've always been one that I don't want to say that one part of our efforts is more important than the other, because certainly we found by getting more people involved, we're becoming much more effective. But I think Judge Peterson probably would be a logic, could be a, you know, depending on what your, you know, possibilities are out there. He could be, at least until we get a couple new folks on board, he could be a logical choice, brings a lot of that expertise. And anytime you try to get, you know, systemic movement here, you want a lot of continuity between the past, the present, and the future. So it's good to be able to maintain that. And obviously Chris is, you know, she brings now a wealth of information as she assumes the chair, a lot of participation, a lot of effort, and those things can continue to be developed as well. And Chris, we love having you be chairing, you know, 7, 8 of these groups, and you've done a fantastic job. But being the chair, you might want to just kind of nudge a few other folks into those roles to have a more supportive umbrella for you.
My plan for a coup is not working out, so I guess I gotta give it up.
Yeah. Well, good luck with that.
All right. Well, you know, I'd certainly be willing to do that. And the question is, you know, looking here as chairman of this committee right now is how do we, you know, which do we do first? If we want to consider combining those, I think that's something we should do with the full council, and perhaps have, you know, the nominations for the separate work groups now. And I'd certainly be willing to do that. I mean, the only concern I have, again, is that if the committee's supposed to be providing oversight for what I'm doing, it bit of a conflict to have me, you know, kind of overseeing myself. But I think where we're at, you know, it seems like it would work, because we're also looking at, you know, other things, and you know, looking forward, as Judge Smeltzer had indicated, we have to be considering about who the 2 new judges will be in 2021, and you know, working towards fitting them into some role in all of what we're doing as well. So I think right now, I guess I mean, look for the names that were mentioned, unless somebody else has any other ideas for nominations. But I guess in light of the interest of time here, I guess I'd be looking for a motion to approve that slate of nominees that was stated by Sarah. I don't know quite if someone wants to actually put it in a motion form, but
My understanding, I would put it in a motion, if nobody else is here, that the previous chairs of the work groups that have agreed to continue to serve as chair are part of the nomination. And then we had Chair Jim Tripp of the Judiciary and Law for the evidence-based decision-making group. He would be added to that. So with that being said, I think you got a slate for your work groups, except for this other issue that we're talking about. So let's take up that first. I make that motion.
okay, is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Is that Chris, or is that Katie?
Katie.
Katie? Okay.
Can I
well,
second, actually, now that I asked that?
Yes.
Okay, motion's made and seconded. Any discussion? And we're talking about, I think, the work groups A through E right now. And just for clarification, as I understand it, would be Brenna Jasper, Communications Work Group, Katie Shalley, Data Work Group, District Attorney Nodoff for the Drug Endangered Children Work Group, Supervisor Tripp for the Evidence-Based Decision-Making Work Group, and Chris Corpola continuing on with the Stepping Up Work Group. Okay, any other discussion? Any ideas? Okay, hearing none, then I guess I'll ask for a vote. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. Okay, so that motion carries. So then we'll put those on the agenda for the January 21 CJCC meeting for approval by the full council. So what about then Family Treatment Court, Oversight and Planning Work Group, and Treatment Court Advisory Work Group? Any suggestions for how we proceed with those at this point?
Just a quick question, Judge, who's the Adult Treatment Court Advisory Group Chair?
I think that's also Ms. Corpola, is that correct? So she has
Yes.
both. And of course, the Family Treatment Court Advisory or Oversight Committee, I mean, that really started as the committee that put together the proposal and for the grant and got it up and running. So the role has changed substantially. So, and again, thank you, Chris, for all the work you did on that and getting the Family Treatment Court up and running.
Welcome.
Okay, back to that. I'll make a motion that we first, that you combine the oversight and advisory group for Family Treatment Court and the Adult Treatment Court, that they combined into one oversight group.
Okay, do you
I'll
have,
make that motion first.
okay, do you want to include a name in that or should we wait for a discussion on that?
Well, let's combine the groups first, and then I'll make a suggestion as to a name.
Okay, so is that a motion?
Yes.
Is there a second?
So moved.
Okay, Mr. Miller has seconded the motion. Any discussion then? Go ahead with your, any thoughts, comments? I just want to throw in there, I think it's probably a good idea if, you know, again, if it doesn't run afoul of our requirements as far as the grant. And so I think it's a good idea. I would suggest a name, it'd just be the Treatment Courts Advisory Group. And but of course, if I end up being a chairman, we might start looking at OWI treatment court this next year, just so you wink, wink there, just so you know. We could be looking for trouble here.
We can all, you can always modify it.
Yes, okay. Okay, so any further discussion? All right, then, all those in favor of the motion made by Judge Smelser indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All right.
Okay, any opposed, same sign? Okay, so then I think we should also put that on then the agenda for the full council. And do you want to wait then for nominations for someone to chair that work group until that point, or?
Well, I'm not so sure. I sense a little bit like there's a couple of questions that have to be answered yet, whether you could do it, Judge, and whether you do it. The other one, you always have an option that I think there's the appropriateness of once in a while having maybe someone else from the county board that is willing to participate as far as providing oversight. Oversight is part of their natural responsibility, but that may not be appropriate. Mr. Miller, you might have some thoughts on that, but I don't know. How does the group feel? I could nominate Judge Peterson just as the kind of the oversight, but if people feel a little hesitant at this point, I think you could table it till you kind of, and I don't know if table's the right term anymore, but whether you want to just to hold on that and see where it goes.
I'd recommend that if we're talking about the full CJCC endorsing the notion of combining the two, that we hold off until action's been taken on that to name a chair.
Okay, Mr. Miller, I think your point's well taken.
The challenge that we only have quarterly meetings, so then we wouldn't have a chair of that group until May.
Well, I suggest that Ms. Corpola be willing to just continue to chair it until you can make that change in at the next quarterly meeting.
Okay, do we need to take action on that?
Depends on if Ms. Corpola is ready. Are you ready to at least continue to serve in that capacity, Chris?
Sure, that's fine.
Okay, then I'll nominate that Chris Corpola continue to advise or assume that or carry out that role as chair of the Treatment Court Advisory Committee.
Okay, any second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion on that motion?
I guess I've got a question of the timing. The CJCC group complete meets in January 14th. I thought you said these quarterly meetings were after that. Are they before?
No, I think you're right. Yep. And I was just thinking about we're going to meet in January and then probably April. So the full council will meet in April. We do have an advisory, family treatment court advisory in January and probably April. And then we also have the family treatment court or the regular treatment court in April. So they'll be close timing.
Couldn't we come up with a name at the full group at the January meeting? And then Chris wouldn't have to do it for the
Well, you could-
first quarter?
You could put it on the agenda that for the board, and then we could just rely on folks to make a nomination from the floor. But
Right,
you'd have to have it on the agenda.
correct. But I guess that's what I'm saying, and if no names come up, then we could fall back on having Chris do it. But there may be a way to fill that position before they start meeting next year, is all
Well,
I'm
listen,
saying.
I have to run. I apologize, Judge Peterson, so I'm gonna have to leave the meeting, so we'll let you folks to your own devices.
Okay. Well, good afternoon. Okay, so I guess the question is, now I'm wondering where we're at. I think perhaps we have the motion made, and now we're in discussion on whether to have Ms. Corporal continue until a successor can be named, basically. So
Well, I guess if we have it worded that way, the motion, that's great, because then if we elect a successor at our January full CJCC meeting, they would take over.
Mhm. Okay, and for those parliamentarians among us, is that a minor amendment to the motion? Is that something that we ought to do?
I don't think there's any problem with going ahead and taking action on the motion on the floor. Really what it says is we're going to continue the status quo unless and until a change is made in January.
Okay.
All right.
Any further discussion on that? Okay, then, all those in favor of the motion to have Ms. Corporal remain as the chairman of the two treatment court advisory groups until a successor can be named or until further action can be taken, signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed, same sign? Okay, motion carries. Okay, so then I think we've covered 7A. Now 7B, when I look at that, it seemed I simply talked about that ahead of time, but I was just wondering, Sarah, do we have some ready-made goals we can look at, or what did you have in mind for the goals for 2021?
Thank you, Judge. Sorry to interrupt. So it's really looking for new goals or changes to the existing goals. This would be something that the full council would vote on. Last year, we spent a good deal of time identifying those goals that I just went over. So I would propose that we kind of maintain most of those, plus or minus some changes. But instead of radically shifting from year to year and what we're doing, this was a way to be more consistent and continue to move the priority areas. So what I can do is I can ensure that those goals kind of go out in the packet for January, and then we'll have another leadership meeting, but an opportunity for input and changes at that January council meeting to the goals for 2021.
Well, and maybe I would just suggest that are there other areas of focus that the executive committee is interested in looking at in 2021 that we could figure out what work group that they might slot into and take the white off the page for some goals for those? Are there gaps, or are there whatever passions that any of the group has of things that we should look at?
Well, again, I still think we ought to take a look at least to study the feasibility in 2021 of sometime after we have 3 judges on board to look at an OWI court, particularly because the consequences for 5th and 6th offense OWI now in a lifetime have gone up so much. There'd be an 18 months initial confinement requirement of an actual prison sentence with very, very little leeway. So, when we're looking at those maybe 2nd, 3rd, and 4th offenses, it makes some sense to try and work with some of those people. But again, that's just something I would, I don't think the goal has to be to implement it. I think a goal, though, to at least to study that, explore that. Anybody else have any ideas? Areas where you see where perhaps we should be looking that we are not looking at? Again, that's something to think about between now and January as well, because that's again something, if you, after giving it some thought, and if there's something that's going on in some other part of the state or some other part of the nation that might be good for Dunn County, we should take a look at it. So, but I think we have a lot we're working on. Go ahead. Was that Ms. Nodal? That's you?
Yeah, I guess I just want to throw it out there that I know 2021 is going to be very busy with the court calendar, just given all of our jury trials have been pushed to 2021. And so I just want to make sure that I think exploring, new goals is certainly great. I just think that we're going to have a lot of backlog. And it's going to be a very busy year with trials. So I just want to throw that out there.
Hopefully.
Well, and the other thing that we've talked about in a few different forums is the fact that I think we're at a bit of a staffing capacity at the moment. I mean, unless we have funding that comes to us with additional, so with the ability to hire perhaps in 2 arenas, not only staff, but additional staff, but also administrative supports for those staff. I think we have to be cautious about what we add. And this isn't a commentary on OWI court. It's just on new initiatives in general. I think we have to weigh them out carefully to see whether we have the system capacity for them. So that and we have some things that are coming. I mean, family treatment court is up and running now, and certainly takes a lot less time than it did in the beginning. Reentry is on its last year, so that will come off of our plate in a year. And then Andrea's comments about just that there is going to be a lot of change in the court system in the next year. New prosecutors, new judges, delayed calendar from COVID, etc. So I think it just behooves us to move forward cautiously with any big projects. And if we get $700,000 from Central Wisconsin Regional Planning, that will be 2021.
Right. Yeah, I would just add that, the stepping up, looking at housing and those crisis enhancements. So those would be kind of added to what stepping up's looking at. And right, whenever there's funding that comes along, there's work to be done with that. And there's a lot of changes going on in the courthouse. And this shift to do the goals was purposeful as well, that we don't have brand new goals every January and drop everything that we've been doing. So with the work groups or different topics, those things should be kind of bubbling up throughout the course of the year as important topics, that we don't have to kind of start with a blank piece of paper come January. Really want to we've worked hard to develop what we've got so far, so we want to continue to enhance and make things productive, but not necessarily go in radical different directions that we lose sight of all the progress that we've made.
Well, and again, I suppose too, even if there's something isn't set as a goal, it doesn't bar us from taking a look at it and exploring it anyway. It doesn't necessarily have to be stated in that fashion. So Okay, well, as far as an action item then, anybody have a motion then related to 7B?
I move that we go ahead and propose the same set of goals for 21 with the addition of at least exploration on OWI court and forward that to the full CJCC for consideration.
Okay, is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion about 2021 goals? Okay, I'll just give people a moment to unmute themselves in case they're dying to come in with some discussion, but okay, hearing none then, and all those in favor of that motion by Mr. Miller, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed, same sign? Okay, motion carries. Hearing none. Okay, so then we're looking at, we have the date set, January 14, 2021, for the CJCC full council. And then do we need to set an executive committee meeting date? You want that to be, I think we were going to talk about how often you were going to meet, and I guess I'll turn that over to you, Chris. What are your thoughts on 8B?
Well, we discussed, Sarah, Judge Peterson and I discussed this last week when we were putting together the agenda for today's meeting, and I think that we moved this year, I believe, to every other month, right? No,
we actually moved this year to every month.
every month. Okay.
When we have a CJCC
CC.
meeting.
Yep, you got it. Okay, because I think that part of that was an attempt to keep us from drift in the CJCC, with the CJCC committee only meeting quarterly, and with there not really being enough content for meetings to meet more frequently than that. At least the executive committee was a venue and forum in which we could continue to vet different ideas and move forward different initiatives if they came up in the in-between. So I'd advocate for continuing with the same schedule. We seem to have had significant enough content, but that's my suggestion.
Any other thoughts?
I would just add that I agree that because we had more frequent meetings, we were able to get that DOJ grant for the courthouse renovations, and we were able to move on some of these shorter turnaround opportunities.
When all of the, not all, but when a significant representation of the major players are at the table on a regular basis, it really does create a nice foundation for us to move quickly. When Sarah and Chief Atkinson and I worked on the regional planning grant, I mean, we could throw that together in relatively quick form. It wasn't the whole grant, but the intent to apply, which ended up being several pages long. But we could do that in pretty quick order, because you don't have to spend a lot of time bringing everybody up to speed in order to move quickly.
So I can make a motion that we maintain the same schedule of executive committee meetings for 21 that we did in 20.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion's made and seconded to keep the same schedule. And any further discussion? Okay, then all those in favor of that motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, any opposed? Same sign? Okay, so the same schedule will be continued then in 2021. So what would be the first meeting date? Or are you going to come up with that?
Yep, I'll come up with that based on judges' calendars, and we'll get the whole year scheduled. So.
Okay. All right. And yeah, I mean, that's it's going to be a little bit different after August 1. Our calendars are going to be changing. We're already starting to schedule some things into 2021. It's sort of interesting to see how that works with 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off, or 4 weeks off of intake. So, okay, anything further? Anyone wants to, I suppose we don't have anything else on the agenda other than adjournment. So I will hereby then adjourn the meeting. So thank you all. I think we're right at 1 o'clock or close to that. So thank you all. It's been a pleasure again being on the executive committee, and we'll see you at the next meeting. Thank you. Aye.
Bye.